Good afternoon and welcome everybody to today's Proptech panel. I'm Carolyn Trickett. I'm a growth principal at JLL Spark Global Ventures. I'm also a committee member at the Proptech Association of Australia. In the spirit of reconciliation, Proptech Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. I'd also like to thank the fabulous support of Stone and Chalk, who make these panels possible. For those of you who don't know, Stone and Chalk was founded as a not-for-profit in Sydney in 2015 to help fintech startups commercialise and grow. From 40 startups in 2015, it now has hundreds of startups in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, covering all areas of emerging technology, including Proptech. So today we're going to be talking about safety on site, in particular, innovations in the commercial space. We're going to be exploring the cutting edge technologies that are transforming our industry and bringing an added benefit of safety into the commercial construction and operations space. Got some very intriguing stories to talk about today in terms of what can go wrong and how to prevent that from going wrong. So let me introduce my panelists very briefly. We've got Scott Schryver. He's the head of operations at Mobiledock. We've got Wayne Herbert, who's the founder of AI Assets, and Derek Feebrey, who's the CEO of Trendspek. So these three companies are all members of the Proptech Association. Proptech Association exists to assist our members, who are the Proptech startups themselves, helping them to grow and navigate their way through the world of startups, venture capital, and everything that goes along with it. So we're very happy to have them here today to help them, ask them to talk about their products and to help educate our industry in terms of the new products that are available. So I'm not going to go through reading out bios. I'm going to leave that up to our panelists themselves to introduce themselves and their backgrounds. And in particular, what about their background led them to be part of the startup that they're in now? And then we'll get stuck into talking about safety. So I'll hand over to Scott first.
Yeah, hi. So Scott Schryver, head of operations at Mobiledock. I've been at Mobiledock for 6 weeks now, but I've come from a large FMCG company that rolled out Mobiledock across 9 of their warehouses. So I've been working with Mobiledock as a customer for many years, and look forward to chatting to you about the safety aspects today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott. Over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, Caroline. Hello, everyone. Wayne Herbert, founder, CEO of AI Assets. So my background was actually a building consultant and originally a carpenter. So qualified carpenter, got into building consultancy about 25 years ago, walking around properties, capturing asset data to do asset validations, condition audits, life cycle models, compliance testing, all of that sort of stuff. And there was no simple way of doing this, hours and hours on site, capturing everything on pen and paper with a camera and then spending days in front of an Excel sheet trying to make sense of it to give reports to clients. So that got me into the idea of we can build something hopefully a bit more efficient. And yeah, we solved that problem quite well. So that's where we are today with the Proptech.
Cool. And Derek.
Hi everyone, Derek. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Trendspek. A bit of an unusual background for me. I spent 20 years in aviation as a pilot. So over a decade ago, that led into starting one of the first drone services companies in Australia. So from flying 747s to flying drones, which ultimately led us to develop Trendspek as a software solution for managing structural life cycle condition of built world.
Excellent. It's a fascinating background from aviation to drones to software.
Yeah.
I'm sure the world of software feels a lot safer to you than some of your experiences in the aviation industry. So So, Derek, when you think about the safety challenges in the commercial property industry, what are some of the significant challenges that you've seen?
So I would say one of the biggest ones we've seen is just the way built assets, especially commercial, retail, industrial, have been managed over a long period of time. And I'm going to say primarily driven around understanding and knowledge of the structural condition of any particular asset, because what we've found is the standard, I guess, across the industry has been very heavily led by representative inspections. And by that, I mean, an owner will typically inspect 20% of an asset annually over a 5-year period. So understanding risk across a particular asset is a 5-year process. And especially these days when we've merged with increased weather events, an aging portfolio, even more, let's call it efficient build process for these days means it's not just the older assets, it's the newer assets that cause just as many problems. And what we've seen is that's led to a lot of incidents, especially around structural condition with spalling concrete falling or signs falling, a lot of inherent safety risks around fall hazards and falling debris that have caused near misses, especially with workers on site or alternatively the public using public accessed areas. So one of the biggest challenges I think we've seen is really around managing the structural condition and risk across not only one building but a portfolio.
And that's not just in extreme weather events, right? These types of risks can happen no matter what the weather.
Yeah, exactly. And then
so
probably,
so go ahead.
Go. No, you go.
I was going to ask you, what about the human safety risks of managing the property itself and doing these inspections?
Well, that's just another compounding risk. And when we're looking at physical inspections, and that's primarily how they're done, there's a lot of working at height. So there's either cherry pickers, boom lifts, using the building maintenance units or rope access down the side. So there's a physical risk of putting inspectors on site, and that's one of the contributing factors to why representative inspections is more the norm, because the cost, time, and safety implication to do the whole building is excessive. So we've seen a lot of incidences, and they're on the increase globally. I think there was like 680 odd fatalities in the US last year alone from working at heights. That's similar to Australia, similar types of trends. So not just that physical safety risk, but also compounds with on-site disturbance. So putting heavy machinery and putting people abseiling down buildings actually disturbs a lot of the building condition as well, dislodging things as well. And then if we look across the industrial sector, walking across warehouse roofs has become off limits to a lot of organizations. And probably the biggest trend we've seen is actually a lot of engineering firms just putting a blanket ban now on facade inspections or industrial roof inspections. They won't actually do it at all. So yeah, there's a lot of inherent risk around managing big portfolios of built assets.
It's incredible, isn't it? So the building itself can be a risk, but then inspecting the building can also be a risk. It could cause more of a risk.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. So Scott, you've seen a bit of a different angle across your career. There's a whole bunch of extra risks that exist within the loading dock space of a building. Tell us about that. What have you seen?
Yeah, so from a loading dock perspective, whether that be in a warehouse situation or whether that be in a commercial building in a city urban precinct, traffic congestion and visibility can certainly lead to some safety risks on sites. So the Mobiledock program software gives the visibility for customers to see what's on their site, who's on their site, and connects all key stakeholders together. So from a safety perspective, having that visibility where there might be congestion, because you get congested trucks or loading docks. Sometimes you get unhappy staff or unhappy drivers. So trying to work through that and remove that congestion can certainly keep people really happy and therefore feeling safe about what they're doing. But the visibility of where things are on sites as well, knowing how many trucks or drivers are on your site can be really important to manage that, especially when if there is an incident, you can quite easily locate where they are and move them to safe areas.
Okay. And with a really big manufacturing facility, I mean, how many different types of trucks and other transportation vehicles would you expect to see?
Yeah, so depending on the side of a facility, you would have anything from small rigid trucks right through to B doubles or even road trains. In small urban precincts, it obviously rigids or courier vans. But then you've got the sites themselves. They'll have whether it's an electronic pallet jack or a forklift. There could be container movements on sites depending on the size of a site. So Mobiledock gives the visibility of that type of resource type. Where it is and the rules assigned to where that should be, and then the people that are then associated with that. So whether that be a customer, whether that be a supplier, or whether it be the site themselves, it can give clear visibility. And then from that, the interaction of that, of a booking through Mobiledock can give you all the information attached to that as well. So from a safety perspective, again, the visibility of what's on your site, but also managing things like how long somebody's on your site as well.
Okay. Talk to us a little more about that. So you're talking about someone as in a driver of a vehicle?
Yeah, absolutely. So within rules that are set up within the Mobiledock process, you can use it for chain of responsibility type processes with your drivers to understand, are they fit and ready to be there? Are they safe to be on your site? But also highlighting and taking timestamps of how long they've been on your site. So if, for example, you've got a 60-minute turnaround for a semi-trailer and that truck seems to be there longer, it's a good opportunity for staff to go and then see with the right triggers through Mobiledock to go and speak to that driver. And are they okay? Do they need a personal break? Do they need that rest opportunity if they're an interstate freight driver? So that they can then continue their onward journey in a safe manner.
Yeah, I'm guessing most of these drivers have traveled either long distances or around in circles and need a chance to refresh during the day. That can't happen if they're stuck waiting in a traffic jam, right?
Correct, exactly right.
Cool. Wayne, let's move on to you. Tell us about your experience with safety in the past.
Yeah, so I've obviously got a lot of this from the asset point of view, going around properties, building the asset registers, understanding them. It's amazing how many people don't have the asset register, or it's in, the building managers, property managers, it's all in their head. It's in one person's head. So we do uncover quite a lot of issues that are there. And obviously for the client we're working closely with, the property managers, the asset managers, those are the guys that really need to, they work to the legal and compliance issues. They have to do their planning, preventative maintenance routines, all of this sort of stuff. Then there's the documentation, the audit trails. And then ultimately the ownership of risk is on those guys for any of the safety and compliance in the building. So trying to give them the better understanding of what they've got and where they've got is where, they often fall down and don't know what they've got. And you think about things like, for example, for the legal compliance, you've got the building standards, you've got the fire standards. So think of a building, all of the fire assets within a building, from the emergency lighting to the smoke detectors, to the sprinklers, to the fire extinguishers. These things all have a legal requirement that they have to be tested at different timescales throughout the year to be compliant. Obviously, in a case of a fire, you want everything working order. So these are stuff they have to do. Same with like egress doors, that type of stuff. You've got to make sure those things go in there. So them are the statutory type of things. There's quite a few of those that can come around. Door access systems is another one. You think of you have your little pass to get in and out your office buildings, etc. So making sure that there's a maintenance regime in place for them is highly important, knowing where they're all located. For safety, you think that if there is a fire event, you want to make sure that they would open automatically so people can get out of the building really efficiently. It also helps you understand who's in the building, where they are, as well, those type of things, which is a big benefit. And then you've got your scheduled type of maintenance, which is really about that it's not required by law, but of course there's a big risk and compliance around it. So what's the condition of all of my assets, of my plant and equipment, for example? You think of a large chiller, distribution boards, there can be fire risks involved with those if they've not been well maintained and looked after. So understanding what those conditions of the assets are, that's also a really big issue to get in place.
So can you give us an example? What's one of the worst things you've ever come across in terms of safety in your career?
How long have you got for this?
Without naming names.
Yes, I could give quite a few of these. So so one is in the a large university, we'll just say, over 400 buildings throughout our portfolio. So we did a full sit audit for these guys. And actually a number of things we found. So we found, I think it was around 15,000 maintenance issues where assets haven't been maintained. So obviously that comes down to that. On a plus side, we found 30,000 inefficient light fittings. So obviously if they switch those, these were the T8 fluorescent tubes. So the T8s are 36 watts if they're running capacity. So switching those out to these, would be probably 30 watts per tube saving. So when you think you've got 25,000 fittings, most of them with double tubes, that's a big, I can't do that calculation in my head, but you can understand the savings they would make from switching those. But the biggest issue we found there was one of the properties hadn't had any fire testing done for over 3 years. So that means they weren't fire compliant. And to add to that, it was actually the student accommodation building. And as we all know, students aren't the most careful of people. They can get out there. So if you can imagine the repercussions if that fire had broken out in that property and something that happened, not only to the risk and the image of the university would have been catastrophic. So yeah, that's probably the worst.
The fact that you've got this story to tell hopefully means that they are going to be fixing.
Yes, I'd like to think they're very much on top of that now.
I love it. And Scott, have you seen some examples of terrible safety incidents in your time?
I think I've been lucky enough that we haven't had many across my my tenure. There've obviously been lost time injuries across sites. But yeah, I think the biggest one that I ever heard of was around the use of automation and robotics, and somebody not following a process and then end up the robotics getting in the way, and that was a lost life just due to not following processes. So which is very tough for them and family, and hence why safety is so important.
Yeah. And Derek, you've already mentioned about bans on roofing inspections. Have you witnessed any events like that where the roofing has caved in or heard about those?
Yeah, we've worked with people, and that's been one of the primary triggers for them to change. Is we've known people fall through industrial roofs, injuries hanging from ropes, injuries on those building maintenance units. We've seen it all from everywhere from injury to fatality of people doing inspections, and then a lot of near misses where falling debris has hit pedestrian areas or public areas with real close near misses. So yeah, we've seen it all.
Unfortunately, but having seen it all, sounds like there's a lot of work that can be done using your products to avoid some of these problems. Wayne, can you explain to us how AI assets can help an organisation manage these safety concerns?
Yeah, certainly. So One of the big issues for the industry for forever basically has been the access to good quality data. I've got thrown the screen change. Is getting good access to that good quality data. It's always been a cumbersome job to build an asset register, as I've explained at the start. Somebody has to go on site and spend days walking around, noting it all down, putting it in Excel. And then it sits in Excel for a long, long time. You know, nearly every client I talk with, it's either they either don't have the asset register, it's in Excel. And I've got one example there, I won't mention their name, but a very big supermarket chain, that's their data. It wasn't actually in Excel, it was in a work order system, CMS system, but it was 15-year-old data. So how can they really do anything of value in 15 years' time to do that? So that's where the problem we're solving is. It's about digitalizing that asset register, and then being able to keep it live and accurate. So it's basically, you can, once you've got it in a digital format, it's very simplistic to keep that live and accurate. So you can always report on that cost-effective data, because it's super cost-effective the way to do it, and you're not just doing it in outdated methods. Now it's really going to that proactive focus of maintenance and management.
And can you help us understand also, how does that help with life cycle planning for building equipment?
Yeah, certainly. So our system has all those built-in algorithms in the back end. So once you've actually built the asset register, the system will produce all of those life cycle and CapEx and OpEx modeling for you. We've got a bunch of dashboards in there, a bunch of Excel outputs that gives you all of that data that you can really deep dive into. You can see where your weak points have been, what you've missed, making sure that your trades, for example, the fire testing one we gave, obviously they had a fire company looking after all of their properties. But obviously they missed a property. So for years they didn't know those assets existed. So it's really about getting that. So obviously they went back to the fire company with hey, this is what we should be doing. Let's update your register and let's work through this together.
Cool. And can you tell us a little more about how you've incorporated AI into your product?
Yeah, so at the minute it's only the small part around the algorithms on the lifecycle modeling. So really, to come out with these, the lifecycle typically has that industry standards. A light fitting lasts 20 years, carpet 7 to 10 years, these type of things. So that's what it works on. So we've built some algorithms in there to make that a bit more powerful. And as we grow, the idea is we'll be actually benchmarking, and the AI will be using the actual data from properties. So, for example, if you're in an office building in Sydney, it'll tell you exactly this type of asset and this type of location. We know it lasts this long, and then one in Perth would be different, one in the UK would be different. Again, it would actually give you, instead of just going, this is the industry standard. So, for example, if you think of a hospital, it runs 24/7. And you might think of, say, a school 5 days a week, probably 8 hours a day. The asset's going to last different in those. So it's not going to be the average 20-year life cycle for that asset. It's going to change in both of those scenarios. But the exciting thing we're also bringing in around that is the asset recognition. So basically image scanning, so being able to use your phone. So it takes the skill level down a little bit. So the contractors like cleaners, etc., can use their phone to go up to verify an asset. It'll be able to listen and look for leaks and rattles and stuff to say, hey, this isn't performing how it should be, and really take it to that next level of easily anybody can then update it. So that then gets in the whole of team to keep that asset register live and accurate. You're not, again, relying on 1 or 2 people to make sure the data's up to date.
So the end user actually goes around and captures an image of each asset, do they?
Yes. Yeah. So you capture the asset, you capture an image and all the details of it. So, if it's got make, model, serial number, asset is, if it's barcoded, you put up QR coded, you put those details in. That's quite a comprehensive asset register on that asset.
Excellent. All right. Scott, let's explore your space a little more. You've mentioned a little bit about what Mobiledock does. Can you take us through how somebody would use that and how that ends up helping with traffic congestion?
Yeah, definitely. So depending on what type of site or customer, we can integrate systems for the movements for a site. So think of anything that would be coming into a site or to be delivered, as an example, or visiting a site. So in our urban precincts, it would be a courier needs to book in to be on site, especially if it's a highly secure facility. So if we've got big, large companies in a commercial building, knowing that you need to know who's on that site. So without a booking, you can't come in. It gives everybody visibility. And the tool itself is about optimizing that dock space. So knowing when a truck can arrive, how long it should be there for, whether it's been there too long, and then it's leaving within its right time frame. And for customers, it gives them the visibility of how, like, even planning out their days and knowing what's in their workload for today. So Mobiledock can help with all of that. It can be integrated, links with the ERP systems or warehouse management systems. But yeah, definitely from a visibility piece more than anything, and optimization of that workload.
So how does that work with the end user? The end user is the dock manager, right?
Yeah, so dock master or a team leader from a warehouse management perspective. So if it's an urban precinct, might be a dock master with a big site. Could even be like a center management in urban precincts. But in most parts for the warehouse environment, it's going to be a gatehouse, whether it's a security run gatehouse or whether it's a dock master or a dock team that'll be using the system to see what's in there. But connecting teams, like if you've got a control tower for planning loads as an example, for couriers and transport companies were booking in for their loads, and also suppliers working with a 3PL can use the system to get visibility of where their stock movements are with their third-party logistics company.
Okay, so all these different user types are logging in, and they've all got one central source of truth about what's meant to be happening on site that day?
Correct.
And has Mobiledock incorporated any AI into their product so far? It's pretty hard to come across one that isn't these days.
Yeah, well, Mobiledock's currently investigating AI at the moment and incorporating it. It's certainly on that path for digitalizing some more of what we do. But yeah, some of the use cases that we're talking about is the ability to see a driver's ETA and whether how that links into the plan. If they're early, if they're late, could the plan be optimized to move things around to allow for, again, moving some of that congestion away, so that if they are running late, if a truck's early on another supply, could that be brought forward and brought in? So the events of unplanned closure, can we now go and use AI to automatically reschedule those bookings for the next best available according to the rules within a site's setup, as an example? And then also we're looking at how we can forecast or use live forecasting. So how's the day is unfolding, or how it is unfolding? Can we better predict whether there's going to be a late or an early based on maybe it's the operations itself, without that driver ETA? So it gives better visibility again back to the dock managers and better to plan their days.
Excellent. Anything that can automatically optimize a schedule and predict the future, I think, would be very handy for the end user.
Correct. Absolutely.
Cool. Derek, can you give us a little rundown now on Trendspek? How's Trendspek helping to address some of these challenges that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so there's two key components from our perspective that what we deliver. First one being around the accuracy, availability of condition records. And secondly, taking a lot of the on-site workflows into an online environment. So to give you an example, typically people will be accessing sites to do the inspections, analysis. You'll have contractors go and do quoting. You'll have subject matter experts and consultants also providing subsequent reports. So a lot of on-site activity, which increases the amount of risk. So Trendspek essentially brings all of those people online to be able to manage the structural life cycle of a particular building. To give you an example of how much it gets used, across the inspection and analysis piece and the planning of remediation, what we've seen, I'll give you an example of a portfolio of just under 100 buildings that has been accessed now over 12,000 times. So essentially 12,000 online site visits by over 200 people across 45 organizations. because it's, even from an engineering standpoint, there'll be 5 or 6 different types of engineers, including civil, and then remedial, and then materials, and they'll all be able to provide their expertise without having to send people to site. So bringing people together online has been a way to mitigate and manage a lot of those risks that we've found owners have been accustomed to over such a long period of time.
So I guess there's an inherent safety avoidance of travel risk as well, underlying all of that, not just the time and the cost.
So we've written a lot of business cases over our time, and there's definite pattern of what that looks like. And when we've written complete risk assessments, it's not just the safety, because safety risk is intertwined with financial risk, which is intertwined with the governance and legal risk, which is intertwined with reputational risk. So one of those risks in itself has a flow-on effect.
Yeah, interesting. And so tell us about, here comes my AI question again. Help us to understand how the AI is incorporated into your product.
So we're a little bit different. We are agnostic to AI. So anyone can upload their AI findings and visualize those across a portfolio. Where we see it being really beneficial is, call it an engineer's assistant, that helps identify potential defects, but still rely on an engineer's experience, and more importantly, their signature to sign it off. But if it's more of a efficiency tool in being able to streamline the detection of it, for an engineer to be able to do the actual assessment, provide the recommendation, and certify those reports. So we more build in the training environments for engineers, because every defect on every material type needs its own algorithm. So that's more around AI in terms of defect detection. Second component is AI more around the analytical piece. So if you've got a portfolio, to be able to start, which essentially has got now just a big database of known conditions and issues that you're monitoring, it's being able to better build your, not just the risk management plan, but a lot of the capital decisions. Because if that can help survey a whole portfolio where risks are, criticality, material, essentially helps an owner with the 2 biggest decisions they're employed to do, which is, where do I allocate capital, what needs capital, or how do I manage and mitigate risk? So it more helps analyzing those databases to help suggest answers across a portfolio.
Cool. I think that's probably one of the big questions that comes up when you're thinking about these problems and what type of solutions are required to address them. Derek, if you were talking to one of your clients or to any organization who's trying to address some of these issues, I think prioritization is one of the biggest question marks. So what would you suggest to a client who's considering how to prioritize addressing their safety issues?
From what we've seen and where we've taken a lot of owners on the journey, is starting with a baseline. So once they've scanned and got their portfolio assessed, then only then can they manage properly risks across the whole portfolio. Because, as I mentioned at the start, typically it's very representative led, which means 80% of everything on the back of it is just assumption based. So they don't truly know. So first is getting that baseline. And then the second biggest part is why wait? as I mentioned, we've done a lot of business cases, and they've all come out with very similar averages of, and across those risk categories: financial, people, reputation. So we've seen risk reductions of just under 70% has been a typical average, and then a return on that capital spend, or the return on investment, being 13 to 15x. So second question we normally ask is, why wait? If you're paying 13 to 15 times more than you should be, plus carrying 70% more risk than you should be, why is there a question around waiting?
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, I think a lot of the question around waiting comes from, who's going to pull out their wallet first?
Yeah.
Where does the budget come from? Scott, let's jump back to you for a sec. When we're talking about return on investment for safety innovations, how should they be looking at measuring for ROI?
Yeah, so with Mobiledock, I've spoken a lot about visibility, and with safety, especially around chain of responsibility, it's all about having that visibility of, where a delivery has come from, how it gets onto your site, and how it leaves your site. So the return on investment to quantify can sometimes, and from a safety aspect, can be a little bit difficult. But when you've got a program like Mobiledock, you definitely get to see how you can make change, and that change can then lead to efficiencies, which then leads into a return on investment. So turnaround times and taking a truck that's been on site for 3 hours down to 2 gives you the opportunity to bring in another truck on that extra hour, as an example. So reducing that congestion allows you to have more trucks on site. So that's where Mobiledock comes in. But some of our customers have even been able to integrate things like weigh bridges and scales to be able to have the weights of a truck automatically linking through to Mobiledock. So from that chain of responsibility, we've captured that truck is leaving safely with the right weight across the axles. But in some parts, has automated some of their processes on site. So they've ticked the safety bucket, but they've also then automated their site through that process, and that's what's delivering the return on investment.
What about measuring the cost of poor safety conditions? How is it, if an organization is considering this, how do they go about assessing that cost benefit analysis?
Again, I think it comes down to what it drives. So the right processes will drive an efficient outcome, and that efficiency will then drive to a return on investment. So I think, again, we spoke about the liability of people, especially from a chain of responsibility perspective. So having the visibility through Mobiledock and capturing those instances across sites certainly helps in reducing some of those risks that can then go through the chain of responsibility processes. So any way that gives you visibility that can lead to a safety incident being managed, or prevented, is always going to be ideal.
Cool, thanks. And Wayne, can you talk to us a little about safety culture? I'm sure you've seen plenty of change over your career in terms of how safety is considered. How do companies approach this, building this culture in their organization?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously first and foremost, the leadership have to take the ownership of it. So it's basically, the leadership have to put it first and foremost of the criticality. But then it's really about involving everybody in it. So, as Derek said initially, create that baseline. And, in our instance, the baseline is the asset register. The whole industry has been very reactive. They wait for something to fail and then fix it. And it should be the opposite way. It should be proactive. Obviously, there's massive cost implications of doing it the reactive way compared to proactive. But then the risk and safety issues are there as well if something breaks down. So you get everyone involved. It's, not just building management, either the leader or the team. Get your contractors involved, get the trades involved, even get your tenants involved to understand it. Do they report on tasks? Do they put it out there? If there's been an incident, is it reported to everybody? Is a mitigation put in? Hypothetically, somebody's potentially close to losing an arm because something happened. It's better to actually put that out there than hide it away. Because then next time they might actually lose it. But if we know about it and here's a mitigation why this won't ever happen again, it's super important to have it that way, than just, you know, so many times I've seen it that some things don't look like that, look very under the carpet, so it's not seen, and we'll fix it up and do this. So yeah, so that would be the one I would say, is to really get everybody involved. And I think the way to do that nowadays, that's what Proptech's enabling. You know, to make this so much easier. There's so much data and things out there to do. Not just the three of our platforms, but many others are out there. Make this much easier to implement and make it much safer and much more compliant throughout the industry.
Cool. I think it's a resounding message for everybody who are considering applications like the ones we've been talking about today, and how they can improve conditions on site and safety conditions on site. It's the people who are on the ground level that are usually impacted by safety concerns. But if something goes wrong, it goes all the way up the line, and it's the people at the top of the ladder that need to be implementing these safety procedures and programs, because ultimately it's probably them who'll have their hand to the fire if something goes wrong. So I think we'll wrap it up in a minute, but let's open it up to the participants. Is there any questions? Has anything come through on the chat? Is there anybody you'd like to pop a question into the chat before we finish up with our panelists? Here we go. How do you mitigate concerns from clients about using AI? Who'd like to take that one on?
Yeah, that's
Wayne,
a very
I think
good
you're
question.
still off mute. Go for it.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. Obviously, there are those concerns there. So it's really about the education piece. You know, AI is here, whether people like it or not, it's going to be here. And the people that take up its adaptation, you know, will be the ones that prosper, and those that don't will most likely get left behind in most areas. There are obviously concerns there. There always will be. Who's behind the AI? What's their coding? What's their reasoning for the AI and algorithms? I don't think it's too bad in our industry, as opposed to the wider industry. But yeah, it's really just that education piece. And as things grow and it becomes more normal, like anything that's new in the industry, it's always a concern. And then it slowly gets to becoming everyday. And, you know, I saw something yesterday, there's 100 million ChatGPT users every day, you know, when you think of a short time. But that's come up with adaptation. It really is that education and time before it just becomes normal.
Very much.
I agree, the education so important. Go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to agree, very much the same, especially around generative AI and language models. One thing we've learned from probably a more complex model is expectations now with AI, or just AI will do all of that. Our sector of the market, especially around structural assessments, that's machine learning, that is not at that level. So we've seen what would take an engineer a few hours to navigate around and pick out structural defects that have got a concern. AI is very challenged in that identification, because it's trying to identify material, lighting conditions, shadows. So it often makes an engineer's job harder for now, with a lot of false positives, meaning they're spending more time going through results than it would have been a tenth of the time just for them to do it themselves. So there's parts of AI that are really expanding, and there's parts that are still got some way to go.
I think agree with both panelists, from Wayne and Derek, but I think also for, you know, if it can save someone else the time to concentrate on another task, they're adding value. So that's where I think it also comes in to be really beneficial when using AI. It's not about removing a role in some parts, it's just about adding the right level of value. And especially when we're talking today's topic around safety, that means someone's paying more attention, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope this has been an educational session. And please reach out to our panelists if you've got any more questions about their products. I'm sure they'll be very happy to answer them offline. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.